Oh,
We are live.
the last minute arranging of the robes. See, everything is impermanent, even the robes.
Hello and welcome to Friday Night Monk Chat here at Empty Cloud. We're joined with our dear Ayasui Jana. My name
The
is
last
Ah,
chat
yes, Ayasui Jana's last Monk Chat.
for a while.
She will be leaving Empty Cloud Thursday morning. So if you have any last questions for Ayasui Jana, feel free to leave them in the chat. And if you have any Dhamma questions left over from the week that you didn't get answered, feel free to leave them here. And we have hello from Rick, Julie, and Kumu for now, and Mary Burns. Hello, Mary. We saw Mary today. Suzanne. Hello, Suzanne. Margaret, welcome. And we also have Teddy. He's not on the screen, but he is here. And
So there, it looks like there's a question.
looks like there may be a question. Hello, Karuna is in Pennsylvania. Rick has something. First of the night. Rick experienced a powerful meditation today.
Yay.
He says, I started with the breath and then focused on reflections to questions, balancing these back and forth for approximately 3 hours. So he's going between the breath and questions. Can you talk about integrating times of reflection in our meditation? Thank you.
Yeah, this is something that I've been working with lately. I don't know if anyone's been at any of the teachings. I've been reflecting on from the Dhammapada, and then there was in the numerical discourses this morning. I was talking about how there were 6 monks, and they were pondering this one verse from the Sutta Nipata, and it was like questions of Tisa Mutea, and it's the what's that selection in the
The
Sutta?
Parayana Vagga?
Parayana Vagga. Yeah, so they had memorized these verses at the time of the Buddha, teachings that were given a while ago, early teachings, and they were just pondering them, and they were discussing them. And so it's not an unusual thing, and it's wonderful that you spent that amount of time just reflecting. This is a method that was taught at the time of the Buddha, either active discussion between individuals, or taking a teaching and really contemplating it. Or I don't know what questions you were asking yourself. It seems like there were some things that you were considering about, hopefully Dhammic. Yeah, I don't know. You didn't specify.
It's true.
But yeah, it's definitely
Hopefully not about the groceries. What to get at the grocery store later on.
Yeah, nothing like that, of course, but more like if there's some teaching that you have memorized and going over in your mind, or some question about Dhamma that you're considering. I think another thing is today is that Venerable Wada and I discussed that teaching, and then we had a little bit of a pondering about it together, and then he went off by himself for a while and came out with a solution for what he was doubting. And I don't know what kind of process you used with that, but so it is definitely a part of the practice. So I'm glad that was a powerful experience for you. And also, if you're having times of you're doing breath meditation and the mind is becoming more still, and then you bring up a teaching that you're wondering about, or you have a question about, and sometimes you can answer these questions yourself. It's just like yeah, so a lot of times I'll be doing reading, but sometimes I'll read and I'll just put a marker in the book and I'll stop. I'll be reading a sutta and there'll be some phrase or something in the sutta that I just start to consider what is the meaning of it. That it's touching my heart, but I don't fully understand it. So I kind of, and then I'll actually look at different translations too, try to see if I can see the Pali too. So I hope that's helpful. There's more people coming in.
There's some people coming. Hello to Nicolas Valentin, Kim, and Rick does say, yes, my reflections are on the Dhamma. So
yes, whether we just assume so, but
yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's
good. Yeah, maybe since there's no question, I'll just really, oh, we do have a question. So I won't really quickly, but I guess what I was going to say, I will really quickly, is when I was reflecting on the sutta, the Majji Sutta, I was wondering about how does this framework, there was one way that I was seeing it, but there were other answers. I wasn't sure what framework they were using to understand it. And I just asked myself, let me think about this as if I had never heard it before. And I used that strategy. So I don't know if that's ever helpful, but that's just what came to mind. I just try to look at it for the first time, like fresh eyes.
Yeah, because you had a particular way of understanding it, and I was presenting it a different way. So we had a discussion of, and I was trying to I usually use metaphors, because that's what helps me understand. If I use some kind of a simile or a metaphor, I make up my own. And sometimes it helps me understand things. But anyway, it looks like there's another question.
Okay, I have another question. So John has a question. On a related note, what do you think about the connection between reflection on life lessons, etc., and formal meditation? I'm finding reflection is more valuable for me now. Okay, this is looks like a different question. For me, I found it helpful. There was a period in my practice where I actually essentially stopped doing, I started doing more contemplative reflection. And I wasn't doing a lot of sitting meditation where I was doing, it was meditation in a traditional sense of the word where you're kind of pondering. And I actually found that was one of the most helpful things I ever did, because it really helped me understand. Because what I was doing before, you hear maybe these Dhamma talks and maybe the teacher, maybe they're a famous monk or something, and they're saying, just go for it. And they're, teaching you this meditation, but you might not understand really the Dhamma. So you kind of pound your head into the wall with the technique. Maybe there's some kind of technique, watching, maybe you're doing breath meditation. Teddy's moving the computer a little bit. You're doing breath meditation or something. So you're just kind of pounding your mind into awareness of the breath. But what I found is I was being advised to really consider other angles on the practice. And had I not done that, I don't know if I would have had the kind of connection that I do with reflection in the Dhamma and the suttas. I really just had to stop and say, okay, well, I need to try to understand. And so that was really helpful. And so sometimes, I guess, at least for me, like you're saying, I'm finding reflection is more valuable for me now. I think that I had the same experience. And then other times it's like, okay, I think reflection is not so valuable now. I think maybe you feel like, okay, I feel like I have a really good grounded understanding, or I feel like I've got as good of an idea as this as I can, and now I need to go higher or deeper and maybe do more basically stillness practice, right? Stilling the mind and not so much reflecting, but kind of embodying the knowledge, right? Just without discursive thought. Sometimes that's more appropriate, but at least in my practice, I did find that if we don't really know where we're going, then sometimes we might be wasting time. If we're just mechanically doing things without really understanding. But that's not always the case, because sometimes, in other traditions, they might say there's 84,000 Dharma doors. And in the suttas, it talks about how some people are really good at stilling the mind, and other people are really good at getting deep understanding of the meaning of the Dhamma. And it says if you're really good at kind of getting deep understanding, but you can't still the mind, you should then work on that. And if someone is pretty good at stilling their mind and calming the hindrances, but they can't really penetrate deeper meaning, then they should work on that. So we should always try to balance it out. And
So I think he was talking about life lessons. So so I think that's really important, where the Buddha talks about anicca, for instance, and then we see something that we really was precious to us is now gone. And then if we reflect, oh yes, this is the nature of things. Yeah, so we're applying the teaching directly to our experience. Oh, I see the craving arising. I can see how this is suffering, something like that. Something really our direct experience. And so that helps us deepen our understanding in our daily life, and it helps us balance our minds. Because, oh yes, this is absolutely true. I could see how when I'm really wanting something, I'm very unhappy. When I have this really strong craving, this is dukkha itself. So, something like that. I'm just using that as an example. But so just a direct application of the teaching to our daily life, and that kind of reflecting. And that's why they have those chanting, some like a Bayagiri monastery, there's like these reflections that they chant, like, I am of the nature to die, I've not gone beyond dying. I have the nature to sicken, I've not gone beyond sickness. Sickness, aging and death, and all that is mine, beloved and pleasing will become otherwise, will become separated from me. And then the whole reflection on karma. So there's these things to be reflected on frequently. And then when we do that and say, something that I really loved, this is gone now, something that I had cherished, a person or, some possession I had is now gone. Then I just say that verse, even, all that is mine, beloved and pleasing will become otherwise, will become separated. Oh yes, this is the nature of things. And that helps the mind stay more balanced instead of, oh no, why me? Why did this happen? Something like that. So life experience certainly is important.
And one more thing that comes to mind, I guess, on this, what you're saying, Aya, and the connection here is like what Aya is saying, when we're reflecting on something, like one of the distinctions that I found helpful was the distinction between concrete thinking and abstract thinking. And I don't know if this is an existent phrase that is in use, but it's one wording that I've heard it phrased. So abstract thinking is where you could think of it as where you take a third person perspective on your life. And it's not really concrete, personal, grounded reality of what you are experiencing. So like, let's say, we're going through grief, and then we think like, oh, the Buddha teaches that everyone is of the nature to die, but we're actually ignoring the deep sinking in of that teaching. We're not thinking about it personally, concretely. And then another one is like, you're going through grief and you think, you really look and you experience your mind states and you reflect on what's been going on in your life on a personal, concrete level. And it's not just wandering thinking, or it's not abstract theory. And to other people, if you were to verbalize it, they might think it's abstract. But for you, it's very concrete, it's grounded. And the Buddha says that if we're reflecting on the Dhamma mentally, it should also, once we start to understand and it starts to sink in, like when Aya was mentioning recognizing that things will be separated from us, if we're doing that concretely, it's like concrete application of mind. The Buddha says that that's a door to liberation, in the same way that we might apply our mind onto a foundation for samadhi. There's the sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya, the fives, and it gives 5 doors for liberation. With you might be hearing a Dhamma talk, and then you sinks in, and then you become joyful, and then your mind gains samadhi, and then you attain liberation. Or you might be reciting a Dhamma talk, or mentally reciting a Dhamma talk. And the last one in there is you're applying your mind to a foundation for samadhi, basically what we would consider just traditional meditation, right? Something like equivalent to breath meditation. And so, but the point is that reflecting on the Dhamma has the same potential. It's in the same list as the foundation for samadhi. Obviously, if we're constantly doing that and we're not actually developing any stillness, then it's probably a time for us to turn away from that. But the concrete thinking, I found this really helpful. Sometimes I look at my reflection and I think, okay, is this concrete? Is this really grounded in what I'm actually experiencing? It's direct thought about my situation, or is it kind of abstracted from my experience? And I found that starts to bridge the gap, because at a certain point, the concrete thinking can drop away, and it should naturally turn into the meditation, maybe. Okay. So that was a pretty good detailed answer there, Aya. Here we have one from Kumo. Dear Venables, please explain Samma Ajiva a little bit more. Some explain this step in the Eightfold Path as livelihood, and others include that and also how we live our lives on a daily basis. Aya?
Well, mostly I've heard it as livelihood, and but how we live our lives on a daily basis also is included in the livelihood. And so if we're keeping the precepts well, and we're able to keep the precepts well, which means not harming, during our, whatever our livelihood is, livelihood meaning that how we earn our living is one thing. It doesn't necessarily have to do with money, but for most people, it would think, I'm earning money, but whatever we're doing, even if the livelihood of caring for ourselves, and because some of that is, like preparing our own food and caring for our people in our family and all this kind of thing, that could also be included in that. But mostly, it's talking about how we support ourselves physically, and it could be growing vegetables or something like that. But so if we're subsistence farmers or something like that, we're doing something to support or this physical form. But if we're doing it in a way that doesn't harm other living beings as much as possible, it's almost like anyone who's a gardener knows that there is some harm that happens, but to try to do it with as much care and as little harm as possible, and honest. There's a whole list of things to avoid for lay people that cause harm for other living beings. There was sale of slaves and animals, and being a butcher, and selling poisons and weapons. There's a whole long list of things that are wrong livelihood. So, and it also talked about honest weights, which meant that you weren't, if you were a merchant, you weren't, your weights weren't.
Tip your finger on the scale?
Yeah, something that's, so that you got more, so things that were, it was accurate. It wasn't in your favor, that you're cheating. You're not cheating. So anything to do with finance, if you're finagling, tax evasion. There's a lot of embezzling, all this kind of stuff. Illegal, anything illegal like that, certainly want to avoid. Anything that causes, like I was saying, harm. See, the question is,
just more detail. It looks like, please explain Samajiva a little bit more.
So that's pretty much the basic thing. There's a whole long list, but a lot of it isn't maybe applicable today. Wouldn't necessarily do, but anything that you feel that is really causing harm to others, if you choose a profession that's, I would do, and the other extent is to find a person where you feel like you're really doing good in the world and really helping others. That would be right livelihood. But certainly avoiding harm. And it does affect your, because most people, I mean, if you're working 8-hour days or 40-hour weeks, or a lot of your time is with your employment. So if you're using right speech with people that you're working with, your acts of kindness, acts of courtesy. So you want to avoid harmful speech and dishonest speech and any action that would cause distress to others. So this it can be integrated in your path and integrated in purifying your sila, keeping that sila well, and that's not killing, not stealing, not lying, not engaging in sexual activity that's harmful to yourself or others, and staying sober, avoiding intoxicants. So if you're doing that on your job, and I think that would be a very integrated way of considering right livelihood.
Right.
And also mindfulness. If you're including mindfulness in your activities, and just also, as we were talking about, reflection as you're working throughout the day, and you're reflecting on what's arising in your mind, and you're reflecting, oh, I can see I'm responding to this situation with anger, and is this helpful to me? No. Is it going to be helpful for my coworkers? No. And reflect, how can I approach this situation in a way that's helpful rather than causing harm? So you can incorporate a lot of things in your life, in your daily employment.
Right. Thank you, Aya. Did you have something you knew?
Maybe just one last point. We were talking earlier about livelihood, and even if
Speak up a little bit.
We were talking earlier about livelihood, and even if you do a job that isn't, breaking any precepts, is actually virtuous and is helping others. There's also the aspect of how much of your energy goes in to your work and whether that takes away from your practice. More specifically, I think we were talking about complexity. I don't want to complicate because you've given such beautiful answers already, but I just found that was so helpful and on point for.
But we probably should keep going because there's more. But thank you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have another one from John here. Kindness sounds nice in theory, but in practice, there are many complexities. When we're depending on the kindness in quotation marks of others, dependence can be a problem for giver and recipient. Some view kindness as an insult to their status. Some feel one would only give kindness if one wants something. So what is your view on effective or realistic kindness? We can always be kind. It doesn't matter what other people think. If people think, oh, you're just being kind to me because of my status, that's okay. I mean, maybe don't overdo it. Don't be, showering people and compliments over and over again. Just sometimes we do have to have restraint. We might go a little bit overboard, right? If we think, oh, I should be kind, and then we start showering people with kindness, it might be a little bit overwhelming. It could be overstimulating. And that does happen. It's less common, but it does happen. And in those cases, I would say, yeah, probably the person is responding. It might be strange for them to receive that type of kindness. Also, sometimes there was recently someone at the program who was saying that they're used to giving, but when they receive something, they feel there's a kind of insecurity of like, oh no, I don't deserve this. I should be giving. And, we feel uncomfortable receiving gifts. So we rather give them. And that's a very common experience. And so, yeah, sometimes being kindness, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't give. Actually, a lot of times it helps those people by a lot of times the reason they might be insecure is maybe they haven't received a lot of gifts in their life. So it even though it might be uncomfortable, it's not an unwholesome type of uncomfortability, right? So if we're being kind to someone in a way that is actually making them uncomfortable in a serious way, that's one thing. But if we're being kind to someone and they're just a little bit shy, they're not used to receiving a gift, we should just be kind. We shouldn't, and we should be understanding. We also shouldn't expect, oh, I'm being kind to you, you should be grateful, right? Because a gift it's freely given. It doesn't expect anything in return. Even we should be happy if someone receives it, even if they throw it away. We should be elated that they gave us the opportunity to receive that gift from us. Because sometimes we might not have the opportunity to give. So it doesn't really matter what someone does with the kindness, as long as we're being responsible with how we're using it. But when you say, at least my response personally, when you say that kindness, it can be complicated in how people react, and some people see it as an insult, or some people think that it's only because you want something. What I would say is that really that's kind of their problem in a way. We sometimes say that, oh, that's their problem. But this is, I would say really it kind of is their problem. If you're being kind to them and they feel that there's some ulterior motive when there isn't. And you could maybe clarify it if they say something, or you could, maybe try to be clear about it. But as long as you're being responsible with how we give gifts and how we show kindness, then we shouldn't be too concerned. It's like we might say something and unintentionally someone gets offended, and we want to learn from that experience. So we don't just say, oh, I didn't mean that, so nothing's wrong, and I can always say that, it's fine. Let's say we say something to someone and they would prefer that we not say that, even though we were trying to help. Maybe this is a common thing. We try to give advice. We thought it was appropriate, but then it wasn't appropriate for them. It wasn't received well. What would be good in that opportunity is to say, okay, I was kind and my intentions were pure, but now that I have new information, now I can be more responsive with how I apply my kindness. Maybe next time I won't do that. Next time I'll know. But we don't need to feel like, I shouldn't be kind anymore then. Everyone's going to receive it wrong. No one understands me. My kindness is wasted. That's not how we should be kind, right? When we're kind, we just do it and then we learn. And it's impossible. Even the Buddha said things and people got upset. And it's not that he was being hostile. It's just sometimes people receive it wrong. And the next time we know, okay, maybe I shouldn't say that to that person, right? So I hope that that's helpful. And we have a question from Sud, a regular here. Dear Venerables, in the Metta Sutta, what does it mean to cherish like a mother? Does it mean one needs to cherish Metta itself, or cherish all beings as a mother?
Well, the mother is this example, and how we should love all beings. And I guess there's that translation, which isn't really accurate, to cherish all living beings, that kind of cherishing. It's more that our regard towards all beings should be the wishing them well and wishing for their happiness. And the mother analogy is kind of like a high, very high bar in a way, because it's even as a mother that would risk with her life to protect her child, and that seems quite extreme, doesn't it? It's like and all beings, but it's more of a state of heart or state of mind that actually, like, I wouldn't risk my life for a spider or something like that. We had this kind of conversation driving, actually, because there was a spider on the outside of the car. So it was like, so you wouldn't risk your life literally, but there's this concern that, we had this whole conversation. There was a concern that this living being it was a perilous situation, but it's kind of like,
You didn't jump out of the moving vehicle?
No, we didn't risk our lives or anyone of the motorists, because we noticed there was a spider on the outside of the car. There's kind of gap between the window and the body of the car, and I think, as it turned out, that the spider never even got harmed. Sometimes they'll just be in the car. So that's an extreme, but it's more of a state of mind where our heart is really open to all living beings, and our wish for them is for their happiness. Wish for them is for their well-being, and then that should transfer into that we do avoid harming beings as much as possible, and that if we can help someone or some being, that we do, and ideally with metta, it extends to all beings, and it becomes an equal regard for all beings, that we have this. Bhante Sujato likes the word love, and this feeling of caring, of love, of wishing well. So not cherishing metta itself, I don't know.
Because I think there's an interpretation that you protect your metta in the mind like a mother protects her child, like you're holding a baby. I think that's what he's referring to.
Well, that would be more that starting with the self, and to cultivate this feeling within yourself of love. So, and I think of it almost like, there's a metaphor of growing a tree. So you do have to protect that, and fertilize it and water it, but it's more of a feeling growing within yourself, permeating, but it also should transfer into how you interact with other beings. Otherwise so you get a very exalted state of meditation, but if you come out of it and you're rude and cruel and stuff, that's not real metta. It's just some state of bliss or joy or something like that, but it's kind of empty in a way. So I think sometimes for a lot of people, the most difficult obstacle is the love for oneself. Not everybody has this experience, but many people do, especially in the, I don't know, I can think it also happens, it happens in other cultures, but in the Western culture, uh, depending on how you're raised. But it's not just for that experience of joy within oneself. It's really experiencing, you do protect the emotion of metta. Um,
Like the interpretation I've heard is that the attitude of metta that you have for all beings, you need to protect that, to protect yourself from getting angry or aversive. You hold on to that loving attitude like you would care for a child. Because some people, what I've heard people say is they say, oh, you don't actually love all beings like a mother loves a child. You care for your attitude of metta towards all beings. But then other people disagree. So it sounds like Sud's asking about that.
Okay, so I'm not so familiar with that, but I do know, that it's got to transfer into how you relate to other people as well. So certainly guard our minds from unwholesome states. And the metaphor of raising a child is that you are kind. So you're kind to your own responses to things. But it's like a mother that's really concerned about their child, where if the child is heading in the wrong direction, you stop them. You say, no, that's a bad idea, depending on the age of the child. But you want to be firm as well as kind. So that's a protection to the mind. And then, just seeing, oh, okay, I see this unwholesome state rising, and that is harmful to my mental state. So, so it is a protection to guard the sense gates and to guard against unwholesome states. So if that's, I guess that's what that's meaning.
So sounds like you're saying both, Aya, then.
Yeah, it is both. I mean, but it has to so if I'm protecting my mind against anger, I see somebody's doing something that I don't like, and I see anger rising in me, then I say, okay, this is not helpful. If I don't guard my heart against that, and I allow the anger to brew, and then I see that person, I say, and then I would get angry at them. So then I've lost it on both counts. But if I think, oh, okay, they left their coffee cup out here, and I see I got irritated, but why don't I just pick it up and, clean it? I guess no big deal, right? And then I feel joyful because, oh, I've actually done something kind. So then my heart is lifted up, and I've protected myself and the other person, because I'm not, I mean, you can get into really petty things, can really upset your mind, and it's not worth it. It's absolutely not worth it. Or if somebody's rude to me, I might feel a flash of anger, but then I think, oh, maybe they're having a bad day. Or maybe, I mean, this is just how this person is, and my getting angry in response isn't going to change the situation. So how can I respond kindly back? Or maybe I just smile and say, oh, okay. Sometimes you don't have to even respond, other than just letting it slide. And that's a protection. I mean, like, rather than engaging or retaliating, getting angry or rude back. So, so thank you for that question.
Thank you, Aya. And Rick has a question here. What types of tea do you find helpful for meditation and daily life practice? Well, I honestly, I don't think that there's a particular type. I mean, I've heard that oolong, a lot of students like oolong because it helps focus, a calm focus. And I don't know if that is really true, because honestly, when I think about it, I don't know if I've really noticed a big difference between types of tea. But generally speaking, I don't like green tea. I find it to be, I mean, it's okay, but I find that the energy for my practice, it tends to be more agitating. And I do find that oolong tea, I do find it gives a very stable focus in terms of the effects of the tea. But I don't, generally speaking, most tea has about the same effect. But I don't know. Aya likes black tea with milk.
That's my habit. I used to drink coffee. I was addicted to caffeine. I just like it. And whether it helps my meditation or not, I don't know. And there's some people that will swear, but it's not going to be the caffeine that that does
No
it.
shortcuts, Rick.
Yeah.
Just kidding. I'm sure he does. Okay, Jared says, Venerables, what is Yonisomanasikara and how is it different from a Yonisomanasikara?
So yoni has to do with the womb, actually, or going to the source or the origin of something. And yoniso, so mind is mana, and sikara is like mind. It's kind of a function or action of the mind. So, so you're directing your mind. One way is like to the origin or the source, or to really consider. You're really considering something deeply. So sometimes it's called like careful attention. There's a lot of different translations for Yonisomanasikara.
I think wise attention is with the Bodhis.
Wise attention, careful attention. But if you were say you were thinking about the Four Noble Truths, this is a really good application of this, where you're considering the source of your suffering. So this is actually going to the source, pondering deeply and looking at tanha. But so it's a deep pondering or reflection on something, and really considering it deeply. I think that the idea of the womb could be applied there, with a really deep considering of something in a Dhammic way. Just thinking about how there's a Patisankhaya Yoniso is usually called wisely reflecting. So that's like considering something specifically, like when we're considering our requisites. And
I think like the hindrances too.
Yeah,
says Yoniso is when you get them.
So Yoniso, so Yonisomanasikara is an antidote to the hindrances, and it's also it's kind of a precursor to a lot of deeper reflecting and insight. So when you're kind of using those muscles of reflecting on things in the Dhamma, then it's really preparing the mind for that deep insight that may arise as our practice develops. You're saying yoniso. It would be as negates. So it's unwise or uncareful, careless attention, and that is the nutriment for the hindrances. So we're not we're just allowing the mind to get into mischief. We're not, or we're just feeding unwholesome mental states and just allowing them to run rampant. So we're not, and we're not seeing the harm. Okay, so the yoniso part would be, okay, I'm starting to see the harm that this is causing. And so reflecting this way, it's a turning a careless attention around and starting to say, okay, I'm starting to notice I've gotten lax and I'm seeing the harm. And so that helps me abandon that unwholesome state. So I don't know if that's answering the question helpful.
Seems helpful.
Okay, so we could probably go on to another.
I was just noticing Rick said, thank you.
Okay.
I've never been someone who drinks coffee or tea. I've been wondering if I should try tea. I find tea less agitating, but that's just mine.
Okay.
And John says, I'm reflecting on Ananda's advice to Vangisa regarding his issue with raga. Animitancha bhavehi mananusya mujjaha. How should I practice this? So that's develop the signless, give up the underlying tendency to conceit. That's what that, to mana, to conceit. That's what that means. And actually, I know this phrase because I've looked at it before, and it occurs in several suttas, kind of verbatim. It's a kind of a phrase that you see repeated. It doesn't just occur here. It also occurs in the Therigatha and the Theragatha. It occurs in some other places in the suttas. So you see this instruction: develop the signless, animitta, give up the underlying, the anusaya. So mana anusaya, that's the anusaya to mana. Anusaya is like the underlying tendency to conceit. And how should I practice this? I think Bhante Analio, I actually know, Bhante Analio just came out with a book called The Signless and the Deathless. And it's about animitta samadhi and realizing nirvana. And I don't have it yet. Someone has offered to send it to the monastery. So I haven't read it, but I have seen some excerpts from it. So you might find that book helpful. And what I could say is you could also look, the instruction in the suttas for how to develop animitta samadhi, or what animitta samadhi is sabbang nimittang amanasikara, animita dhatu manasikara, something like that. I can't remember exactly, but the translation is not paying attention to any signs, paying attention to the element or the property of signlessness, which is basically it's basically synonyms, right? So not paying attention to any signs, and signs, nimittas, these are features. So the best way to think about it is, if you look at this, I'll use this, an actual object. The best way to consider it, actually an easier way, if you look at this Buddha Rupa here. So how do we know that this is a Buddha Rupa and not a hat? How do we know that that's not a vessel that we need to turn upside down and spin in a circle and chant, some syllable to, right? Because how do we know we don't need to sit on that? Or how do we know that is, a person? Because there's certain features, they're called, the reason the word sign is used is because it's like indicating something. So for instance, we know that those are hands because we recognize, okay, these long things, these are fingers. So there's this sign, the features of like a long extended object with the flesh and the knuckles, all those little details that I just pointed out, our mind puts it together and it creates a concept of a perception, right? If you think about the word perception, sanya, or in Sanskrit, sangjna. Sang means like together, and jna or nya means knowledge. So it's like we take these things and we put them together to know something. So based off various features, for example, the protuberance on the head, the long ears, the mudra, the hand position, the positioning on the shelf, I can tell, oh, this is supposed to be the Buddha. This is supposed to be a representation of the Buddha. So there's various details and features that I'm picking up on, and my mind is creating a perception. So animita is the exact opposite of that. So we direct our mind away from all of those features. But then the suttas add this detail. They say, paying attention to the property, the dhatu, or the element, or the signless. And my understanding of why it says that, and I've heard this from other monastics as well, is that it's trying to differentiate. It's not saying that you become completely unconscious. So you might think, oh, I turn away my mind from all features, all signs, all features. I actually like the translation featureless better than signless, because it's signless. You think, oh, so the road without any signs on it or something. But featureless, there's no feature. You can't create any perception. There's no feature whatsoever. But it's not unconsciousness. And it's also not neva sanyana sanyayatana, which is the dimension of neither perception or non-perception, which I'm not going to talk about that. But it's not this other formless attainment. It's actually something else. And I think that's why the sutta is saying, you pay attention to the property of signlessness. And the best example I can give of that is if you look at the Buddha Rupa and imagine that the Buddha Rupa disappeared, and you pay attention to the absence of that. Or if I lift up an object, because visual is really the best way to understand it, is if we look at this and you look at the space where this is, the sign of this bottle, so we understand, oh, this is a bottle. You take it away and you perceive the absence of it, but you're not perceiving the wall. You don't focus on the wall. If your mind rests on the wall, let go of the concept of wall. Let go of the concept of white. Let go of all concepts. Let go of all features that your mind grasps onto. Because we grasp onto things and then we solidify them. And we think of them as objects that exist outside of us, right? And so what it is it's trying to deconstruct how we grab onto features and we create concrete objects that then we relate to. And this also gets into the concept of papancha, where we start to, once we have an object, we start to maybe desire it. Or sense restraint, the Buddha says, don't focus on the signs and the features that create craving and aversion. So the idea is that maybe we see something and, oh, I hate the Buddha Rupas that have protuberances like that. Or I hate wooden Buddha Rupas. So there's a particular feature, I don't hate them, but there's a particular feature that we pick up on and we know if I focus on that, I won't like it. But maybe we focus on like, oh, but it's so nice that someone donated this. So we can focus on other features that might bring up joy. So different features, we relate to them differently, we grasp onto them. This is trying to say, turn your mind away from all of them. You completely let go of everything. And the reason, my understanding, again, this is not, I haven't given up the underlying tendency to conceit. So this is my understanding of this practice, is that the conceit is essentially, we grasp onto certain things. We have this tendency of mind of like, grasping on, say, I am this, I am like that, or I have this. So there's certain features, there's certain concepts of who we are, ideas of what we are. Someone says something that offends us. Oh, you shouldn't say that to me because X, Y, Z. There's all these concepts that we grasp onto and build, and that we maybe create craving in the mind or aversion in the mind. This practice is letting go of all of that. And when you learn to let go of every feature, you start to learn that it's all constructed, it's all created. And this is not idealism per se, because that would be another concept. The concept of everything is in my mind. The idea is that everything is conditioned by our experience, right? We have this subjective experience of things that we are creating. We're like the painters on this canvas of the mind. And we do this with our intentions and our karma, and we do this with our perceptions and our ideas and our preferences. And so the practice is getting us to let go of that. And then when there's nothing left to like, if you realize that everything that we grasp onto, it can be let go of. It can cease. It's when we see something cease, we understand that is not reliable, because we know, that can disappear. So like, all the perceptions and features of the Buddha Rupa, they can completely disappear when you turn your mind away from them. And they're liable to vanish, and they are not constant. They're not something that is eternal in our experience. It's created in our experience. And by doing that, we learn to let go of all these tendencies. And the actual attainment of Animita Ceto Samadhi, or Animita Ceto Vimutti, sometimes it's called, it's a very profound attainment, and it's also one of the doors to liberation. So it says, like, when someone leaves the cessation of perception and feeling, they'll make contact with the signless. And there's other things that indicate that Animita is kind of a characteristic of Nibbana, because it has no, Nibbana is the cessation of things, so it has no signs. So Animita Ceto Samadhi is not the same as like attaining Nibbana. You can attain this without attaining Nibbana, but it gives you an idea of letting go. And then all you have to let go of is that meditation state itself. And if you want to learn more about it, I recommend Bhante Naliya's book, and I also recommend the Chula Sunyata Sutta. It talks about developing this, and also the Mahasunyata Sutta, which talks about sense restraint and seclusion, and also developing jhanas in order to help develop the state.
It's kind of aiming high. I don't know how far you are. But yeah, certainly foundational things like you were mentioning there.
Yeah, sense restraint is really a good beginning. That's, if we can't, sense restraint is absolutely necessary, because that's turning your mind away from grabbing onto coarse features. So how should I practice this? That's one example of how you should start. And you just let go, let go, let go. Did Amy have something?
Oh, no, I was just really appreciating your answer.
Oh, okay.
It also reminded me of Suvijana's sutta study this morning about the seamstress and the nama rupa and consciousness in the middle. Yeah, adjacent to that. Thank you.
Great. Okay, we have one for you.
Excuse me.
Rick has a question.
Okay.
When we have the feeling things shouldn't be this way, what are skillful means to address this mind state?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I like to think that not wanting is a form of wanting or craving. So we're wanting it to be a different way when we're saying it shouldn't be this way. So, and we can see the suffering we're creating for each other's, or for ourselves, each other too, probably. Because if we're demanding things to be something other than they are, so we're being adverse to reality, because if this is how things are and we don't want it that way. So this is aversion to our situation. So that's really causing a lot of dukkha for ourselves. We have to be compassionate for ourselves, but first there's like recognition. I'm saying that things are supposed to be different than they are. I'm seeing this tendency in myself to want things to be different. So that's why I'm saying they shouldn't be this way. They're supposed to be some other way. And so we recognize that as a problem. And then it's kind of like if I walk in my room and I say, oh, this shouldn't be this way because it's a big mess. That's one thing. So I could say, okay, maybe I need to take time to straighten out my room. So that's one thing. But it's just like the world, people being violent, there's wars, there's disease, there's poverty, there's racism, sexism, there's, people just greedily using up resources, all this kind of stuff. And can I do anything to change that? I can clean my room, but can I change the world? No. I can do my best to be kind and gentle, and in my sphere of influence, try to do things better, but the big picture of samsara is not going to change because I say, oh, they shouldn't be this way. So this is a really poor use of my energy. I'm just causing myself unnecessary grief. So the self-talk is kind of, I do this kind of self-talk when I see myself frustrated with how things are. If it's, way out of my capacity to do anything. But if it's something that I could, then I should apply myself to it. And also prioritize. Okay, my room's a big mess, say. And sometimes it is. Okay. What is this my priority now? I could get really upset with myself. But let's say I don't have time because there's a lot of other responsibilities and this is lower on my priority list. So I said to myself, okay, I'm going to just set aside some time when it seems like, in my schedule, I can fit that in to do that. But if I beat myself up and say, no, it shouldn't be this way, and I'm spinning my wheels and wasting my energy. So first you have to look at, can I do anything about it? And is it the appropriate time to do something about it? And then there's these things that are kind of in between where, let's say a relationship with a friend or somebody important in your life, and things are going really badly. And then you say, okay, so how do I care for it? And you might put some energy into it and might not solve the problem, but at least you're doing something proactive. So there's all kinds of degrees of that shouldn't be this way. So just assess the situation. First thing is, can I do anything? Is it the right time? And then some things you have to accept. I'm going to make an attempt to make a change, but it might not happen, the change that I wish for, but I'm doing my best. And then I accept that I've done my best. And so I hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Ara. And Mary has a comment just for you. She says, have an enjoyable trip back to your home base. We will all miss your Dhamma talks and beautiful presence at Empty Cloud. May you be well, happy, and comfortable in all things.
Oh, thank you, Mary. Yeah.
Thank you, Mary. And Pial Walpula says, does consciousness belong to Nama of Nama Rupa, or is it separate from the Nama Skandha? If it belongs to Nama, how does Nama Rupa lead to consciousness independent co-arising?
That's a good question.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I think if you want to talk on dependent co-arising or dependent arising, that's not going to be possible here. But just this, this part of it. So what I will say is that in the suttas, in the early suttas, vijnana, consciousness, awareness, it does not belong in the nama category. In the commentaries, sometimes they do include vijnana. And so if you hear that, it's not necessarily that someone's just making it up, but I'll just talk about the sutta perspective. The perspective in the early suttas within the Pali Canon is that nama rupa is, consciousness is not part of it. So in nama, there's a monk who, he passed away, but his name was Bhante Katukudunda Jnanananda, and he gave the simile of the hand. And I can't remember all of it, unfortunately, the exact how he did it, but it's I think it's something like Pasa, Chetana, Vedana, and Manasikara is one, but I think that was the thumb. Pasa, Vedana, Chetana, Manasikara, and was it Sanya and perception? So that is contact, feeling, perception, intention, and attention. And you could think of it like this. Nama, it means name. And it's how I talked about this with the Animita thing, the explanation of Animita and perception. Nama is, you could think of it as like how we recognize or name things, not literally, but it comes from that. So with the way that we recognize something, we might have a perception of it. There's a certain feeling tone that arises along with it. We have to give attention to it. There's the contact, so the actual sensory experience of the thing. And there also the intention might be like the certain kind of thoughts or the intentions or the way that we might use and apply our mind to the object, to the perception or the sensory experience. So that's nama. And rupa is, you could think of it as it's like the actual, it's defined as the four elements or things derived from the four elements, which is kind of like the actual object itself. And I'm not saying, as an inherently existent object type of thing, but it's like if we have it's kind of the material qualities, right? The material qualities that are refined and recognized and understood and related to with the mental factors. And the simple way to put this is that nama and rupa, they're everything in the aggregates except for consciousness, right? And so the nama, the definition in the suttas, it goes into a little bit more detail. It describes it a little bit. It's not, I don't want to say they're exactly the same, but if you want to think about it from a little bit of a simpler perspective, maybe, nama is everything that's not rupa and consciousness. Rupa is obviously rupa. And vijnana it's the awareness of the phenomenon. So I hope, when I say phenomenon, I mean an experience. Through any of the senses. So like if we experience a touch, if we experience a sight or a sound or our own body, but there's also, so consciousness is, the awareness of that experience. There's also with independent arising, namarupa sometimes is more specifically like the actual personal, you could say, aggregates or the actual personal elements or properties or constituents, like our own physical, the rupa is like our own physical basis for the senses, and the nama is like our own mental capacities of naming, or again, naming as a metaphor, not literally just, speech, but naming as like our perceptions and our intentions and our attention and our feeling. So it's the personal individual constituents which relies on consciousness to occur, to happen. So my experience of the world is dependent on my physical basis, my physical presence, like the internal sense gates, right? The eye, the ear, the nose, my internal senses, and my mental capacities, my mental factors that allow me to recognize and relate to the world. And that cannot be separated from the material side. That's why nama-rupa is one thing. This is not like a mind-body duality. The Buddha said that they're inseparable. We can't conceive of physical matter without perception, without feeling, without attention to that. So it's impossible to separate the mind from the physical aspect because we recognize the physical with the mind. And the physical is the basis for the recognition, if that makes sense. And so consciousness is, it's what allows all of this to be present. So what allows my sense gates and my mental factors to occur, the awareness with they occur within awareness, the presence of these things. That's because I'm conscious. If I were unconscious, then these things wouldn't be occurring, right? We wouldn't be able to recognize and utilize the physical and the mental components of our existence. And so with namarupa and vijnana, I wouldn't say namarupa leads to vijnana, because when you say leads to, it almost implies like, this happens and then that happens. But actually the Buddha says, I think Aya talked about this morning. The Buddha said, so you might want to listen to Aya Suvijana's talk. It's called In the Middle. It's on our channel. She did it this morning. But she talked about, I wasn't actually there, but I heard through hearsay that she talked about the sheaves of reeds. So two things that lean on one another. And I won't explain it in detail because Aya Suvijana already explained it. But it's basically they're codependent, which means that if you take away namarupa, you couldn't have consciousness. Consciousness is only conscious of, and and within the physical mental plane, again, as one thing. So we're not separating the physical from the mental here. But if there's nothing to be conscious of, then there's no consciousness. And sometimes, I know that sometimes people say this word like pure awareness or something, consciousness without an object. And the best example that I could give just really simply about this is imagine your tongue without any taste, no sense of taste. That would be consciousness without an object. It's not so mystical. It's the lack of sensual, imagine some blindness, right? If you're blind, or if you know someone's blind, or you imagine blindness, what would it be like to have an eye without any object? It would be unconsciousness. So consciousness without an object, it, frankly speaking, you could say it doesn't make any sense. It's like it's a paradox. Consciousness is of something. So imagine taste without an object, or seeing without an actual sight. Well, that doesn't make sense. You can't see something without a sight. So maybe you're seeing light, or just, you don't see a specific object. So maybe someone's conscious of just the very fact that they're conscious. That might be the dimension of infinite consciousness, or it might be reflective consciousness, but it still is taking an object. It's still dependent. So consciousness is dependent on these mental and physical factors. And the mental and physical factors, like I said, without consciousness, they wouldn't be able to be experienced. So that's what it means when they're dependent on one another. And that's why consciousness isn't part of Nama, because Nama occurs within consciousness, and consciousness depends on these things to happen in order to be present, right? In order to say that we're conscious, there has to be something we can point to. So Nama Rupa is kind of like what we point to. We point to our mind and our body and the experience of these things. That's how we know we're conscious, because they're happening. And the reason that we know that they're happening is because we're conscious. So you can't separate one from the other. I hope that that's helpful. Does that seem to make sense, Aya? Okay. And it sounds like John may have a question that's related to what you were saying. I find these days there is often a lot of conflict between young and old people. It seems these groups have very different values, experiences, expectations. Both think the other is bad. What to do from the point of Dhamma? How to handle disrespect from another group along these lines? Maybe besides along these lines. Yes, besides just two. I don't know.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I think there's kind of idea of respect, mutual respect. Sometimes it's getting lost, and I have I guess to not such a great degree. It's kind of the nature of things, though, for new ideas to come up, and then it's like even what you groups call themselves, all this kind of, the new generation wants to come up with some new thing, and they come up with new words for things, new labels for things. This is the no, actually, and yeah, and then the society is moving faster and faster and faster and faster. And as a person grows older, their capacity to move is slowing down, slowing down. Their mind, their body, everything is slowing down. So then there's this going at a different pace. People are going at a different pace, and they so there's kind of a lack of compassion, a lack of respect, a lack of patience, and these are all unwholesome qualities when they're when it's disrespect and impatience and cruelty rather than compassion. So for oneself to say, oh, I need to develop these qualities of patience, compassion, respect, and we can't control other people. It's impossible. But if we're cultivating these qualities in ourselves, sometimes this affects the people around us. If we're treating people with respect and with patience and compassion, and in turn they may treat yourself or others. If I just, I saw this one, it was a video or something. It was online. And there were people that were doing these acts of kindness. Like somebody dropped, they saw that somebody had dropped something, and then somebody else helped that other person pick up what was dropped, like papers or something like that. And just a random person on the street or something like that. And somebody else was watching them do that. And then the next incident was that person that witnessed the act of kindness saw, like, maybe somebody had things in their arms and they were trying to get through the door. So they opened the door. I'm just making things up. So they opened up the door. Story. No, but it was something like that. And it was like one thing after another, but you had to really pay attention that there was somebody else witnessing that act. So let's say I see Ayawada here, and he's being very patient with people who've come here. And I say, oh, wow, that's really admirable. And then I think, oh, I'm quite impatient. And then I think I'm admiring this, Aya's behavior. So then I think, well, maybe next time somebody comes, I can behave in that way too. So we can model our behavior after people that we admire, and then we can actively cultivate. We notice in ourselves our lack of patience or respect or whatever. And so acceptance too. Acceptance that people are going to be behaving differently because of their age. I mean, I would just expect that people that are a lot younger than me are going to be moving faster. Their minds are moving faster. They can hear better than I. They have all these different qualities that now with aging, it's become more difficult. So then I become compassionate towards myself as well, because it's impossible for me to keep up with other people. And then maybe I'm compassionate with them because they don't
know what they're going to lose.
Yeah, sometimes I just remind people, yes, what? But also just know that because of youth, they might not be thinking about that. So different values, different experiences, and this does come from how we were raised and what was a bit, things are changing so rapidly, with technology and things like that. I was thinking about my grandmother's time where most people didn't even have telephones. Quite a few people didn't have electricity. And that's in this country. This is still parts of the world where people don't have these things. We're just expecting that everybody has a cell phone. And everybody knows how to use the technology. And the technology is changing so quickly. So the values of, how you're raised, like I was telling somebody, it was about 20 years ago, I was working with disabled children, and I mainstreamed them in a classroom for, mainstream kids, right? So I took them into the classroom for the regular kindergarten, and the kindergarten had a bunch of desktops. The kids were already using desktop computers,
20
and
years.
they wouldn't even, and they weren't. I didn't even. They weren't even invented at the time when I was in kindergarten. That was, we had pencils and paper, and crayons, and they're having these little desktop computers, and so it's just a different world. So we're going to expect that the values and I don't know how old you are and what end of that you're experiencing, but for yourself, just to be compassionate on whatever end you are on.
Mhm.
And I think that the young people should be respecting the elders, and the elders should respect the young ones as well. So I hope that's helpful.
Okay. And we have actually 2 questions. Did the Buddha die by eating pig meat? Was it pig meat or something else like mushroom? Give me a detailed explanation. And then Samaditi says, okay, this might be the same person. And then they say it a third time as well. So they would like detailed explanation. And I mean, so actually, I can't give you a detailed explanation because this has been a point of controversy for thousands of years. And probably because for some people, it's really uncomfortable that the Buddha ate pig meat, but it's also not just about emotions. It's also that it really is, the Pali word is really ambiguous. It's not just, we don't want to hear that he ate pig, he ate pork. The Pali word means something like pig's delight. And pigs, there are mushrooms like truffles that pigs do eat. And I think actually there is a mushroom in English called something like pig's something. And so it really exists. And we don't know, because no one is a native speaker of Pali, and this was thousands of years ago. And we don't know, maybe they had a term for mushrooms called pig's delight. We wouldn't know that. It's been checked and it's not clear. Did you have something on the side that you?
I think the issue too is whether he was a vegetarian or not. And no, he wasn't. And he also forbid the monks from actually just being all saying that that's like a
Requirement.
It's not in the Vinaya that we must be vegetarians. And there was this one Devadatta who wanted to insist on that. And being mendicants, we're dependent on other people and what they commonly eat. So if a monk is traveling in an area like in Nepal, where they don't have the ability to grow a lot of grain and vegetables, they're dependent a lot on meat. And so we can't demand a certain kind of food from population. If it's not there, it's not there. We starve. So whether or not he died of some kind of food poisoning, and it said that he knew that what he was eating was poisonous. But what it was, like Venerable Wada was saying, it's uncertain, and that is a point of controversy. But if the issue is meat eating, yes, he would have been eating meat during his lifetime.
Yeah, there is actually a sutta also in the Anguttara Nikaya where the Buddha accepts pork explicitly. So if you're wondering, yeah, that is said. Angel says my question was skipped. Let's just double check that. Angel. Oh, whoops. Apologies, Angel or Angel. I feel it is easy to take refuge in the Buddha and the Dhamma, but the Sangha can be a place of conflict for queer people like myself. Any advice on moving through this difficulty? Did you have any advice?
Well, I'm not sure what being queer would how that would make it difficult. I mean, really, I guess if there are communities that are unfriendly to people that are their orientation, how they make families, who they choose to have as their partners or spouses or whatever. Yeah, find communities that are friendly. And actually, with the Buddhist teaching, we're with the Metta Bhavana, we love everybody. And so acceptance and loving and compassion should be what the monastic Sangha should be cultivating. So I'm sorry if there are some communities that may not be accepting or understanding. But find monastics that you feel happy with and that are accepting. And certainly Empty Cloud is a friendly environment, accepting all kinds of people and all kinds of relationships with people. We're celibate. And we don't demand anybody to be celibate. That's not the point. This is our own development, our own choice. In order to be a monastic, it's at least in the Theravada tradition, we need to be celibate. But as long as the sexual behavior is consensual, not harmful to other people's relationships, I think everyone here at Empty Cloud doesn't have a problem with who people spend their lives with and who people enjoy intimacy with. So yeah, I don't know where the conflict is coming from. I'm not sure. You may be encountering some communities that are not welcoming, and I feel sad for that, because that's really not in line with the Buddhist teaching, because it is acceptance and love for all beings, no matter what their sexual orientation is. So I hope that's helpful. And
we may have to do Zen answers. Are you down for Zen answers, Aya?
Zen answers.
We have about 2 or 3 more minutes here.
Okay, 2.
So let's go ahead and find where we were. Let's do Zen answers, everybody. And if you're not satisfied, come back next week. Okay. So Animita Samadhi can be attained if one focuses on space between objects. No, let go of all signs, including space. Space is a sign. Animita Samadhi is something like instructions Buddha gave to Bahia.
No.
Okay, good.
Because that is dependent, the seen and the heard and the sense. So those are signs too. So yeah.
Okay. Is it Nama and Nama Rupa consist of feelings, perception, volition, contact, and attention? Yes, that is correct. In regards to the 10 unwholesome actions, it says to abstain from coveting, and then later it says to abstain from stealing. Aren't these the same things?
No. Coveting is wanting something that's not yours. It's a strong desire. And then stealing is taking something that's not yours. So you might covet something and steal it, but those are 2 different things. The coveting may be the motivation for the theft.
Great. Thank you, Aya. Chocolate isn't allowable. Would chocolate pudding be allowable? It depends. Probably not.
Probably not.
Unless it was just chocolate and butter or something.
Oh, yeah. It could be creatively made, I guess. Yeah.
And, okay. Oh, we only have one more question. Can we say that Mahayana and Vajrayana are Sangha separator? Sangha Vedika or Bhedika? Or is it a split? Is it a schism? No, it's not a schism. Those are just different ideas, but there wasn't a schism. It's just people with different opinions, which happens everywhere, or different practices. Everybody practices differently. Okay, Aya. Thank you for your time, Venerable.
Oh, thank
did
you
it.
too for your wonderful answers.
Second.
Yeah,
Last
so
monk chat for the time being.
Yes, this will be Aya's last monk chat, so we'll all send her off with beautiful welcomes, or not really welcomes to a new beginning. Beautiful send-offs. So thank you, Aya, for spending your late nights here on Monk Chat with us.
you're very welcome. It's been wonderful being here at Empty Cloud, and yeah, I've had a few more days here, like about a week, and then I'll be in California, and then maybe Northern Territory.
And where can they find you if they want to follow your teachings, Aya?
Oh, I'll be at Dhamma Monastery, and you can go dhammadurini.net.
Sorry, I'm just noticing I'm higher. Noticing I was elevated on the screen. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Sorry to
okay.
interrupt there.
That's okay. You're taller than me, so you have to put me in a high lama seat.
So Dhamma Durini. Okay.
Dhamma Durini.
And there's a YouTube channel for that, Aya? Or?
There's YouTube. Yeah.
Okay. And please follow up with Aya's teachings if you're interested. And everybody have a beautiful night and hope your practice goes well. We'll see you next week.